Alright, hey everyone, Gratuitous from beatstruggles.com, and welcome to Foundational Basic Drum Loops. So first of all, we're going to start off with our slideshow, and this is to do with volume. So every single drum loop is going to have volume. So every single individual hit. You can also change out the word volume for velocity as well. This is something that it is very powerful, and it is often overlooked. So for example, if you had a kick drum that is playing the same velocity or same volume every single hit, that's fine, let's say in a dance track. But let's say you're working with like a hip hop loop. Sometimes you don't want that kick drum hitting the same volume every time. If you adjust just like a certain note, it can kind of give a rocking kind of feeling or a loose feeling or a more human-like feeling. Not so drum sequencer robotic-like. Not just for drums, you guys can use it for snares. This is a great tool for hi-hats to kind of give them bounce. Same with instruments, you can just adjust certain notes. Like for example, so you have a classical piano player who's playing on the piano, right? If they're always playing the notes the same volume, it doesn't give any emotion into their piano piece, and it's the same thing for drum loops. So our next one is going to be sound selection. So sound selection, it kind of molds the feel of your track. In a few moments, we're going to come up with a point here, and it's going to be sound placement. Your sound placement is what defines what genre you're going to create. Like that kind of creates the rhythm, but the sound selection kind of creates the vibe off of that rhythm. So for example, if you have a hip hop loop, but now you change your sound selection, well, that loop can change from a hip hop kind of classic kind of beat, you know, it's kind of a clean sounding drum loop, but it's still a hip hop loop. But then let's say you change some of those sounds to more of a vinyl, you know, has kind of background static in a lot of the hits and stuff like that. Now that hip hop loop that was classic, it could be now turned into grimy, gritty kind of feel, all to do with your sound selection. So just to read the point here, so depending on the length of your sound, it could be used to fill in gaps to make your drum loop sound fuller. So for example, if you have a snare hit with some reverb on it, it has that tail, and that tail can overlap other sounds, which is good because it fills in space in your drum loop. Whereas if you have a short-tailed snare, your sound can be very dry. Sometimes you want the dry, but it's very hard to make it sound fuller if it doesn't have a little bit of ambience, a little bit of tail. And when it comes into sound selection, sometimes you only want certain sounds to have that tail, because if all sounds have that tail, it's going to be hard to mix, because with all your frequencies, it's going to be smeary. Whereas if you have a lot of more dry sounds, but then only a few kind of tailed sounds, then you can kind of mix a lot cleaner, but then still have that fullness of sound. You know, I'm just kind of giving you guys ideas on your sound selection. But so your volume is very important, and same with your sound selection in your drum loops, okay? So next we have panning. So first of all, if you don't know what panning is when you can adjust a sound's volume to be just on the left speaker or just on the right speaker. So for example, that sound could be 100% to the left, it could be 50% to the left. Panning is very, very powerful to kind of create variety and change up in your track. When you're listening to sounds in the drum loop, a lot of these sounds are dead center. For example, like your kick drum and your snare, they're like dead center. So if you can, you know, pick and choose sounds every once in a while to kind of be like far right and then far left, such as like a bongo hit and stuff like that. First of all, it does catch like the listener's mind off guard, so it kind of refreshes their mind. It creates separation. Okay, so the sounds that are on the left and right speaker, they will pop out a little better than if they were just dead center with all the other sounds. And then again, you know, it does just maintain variety throughout the track. This isn't something that you just always want to be doing. Same with the volume. You want to pick and choose certain sounds, and when you pick the right one at the right time, that's what makes those really catchy drum loops, okay? And then now sound placement. It defines the rhythm of the drum loop. So what I'm saying there is this defines what type of beat you're going to make, whether it be a dance track, a hip hop track, or like an R&B kind of track. So for example, if your kick drum is playing on every single beat, it's probably going to be a dance track, you know what I'm saying? And unless you change up the rhythm of your kick drum, it's probably going to be pretty hard to pull away from that dance track kind of feel. Just how you position your sounds is very important for defining what genre you're going to create. And also your sound placement, in my opinion, is your hardest task as a producer, because that's what creates catchiness. That's what creates, originality. It's very hard to know when you're starting up what sounds good, like where can you place your sounds so that it sounds like a really good beat. So over the years of my producing, I have realized like where safe spots are for your sounds. So for example, you can place sounds always in certain areas and they're always going to sound good. But then depending on the type of track you're creating, you can then adjust your sounds a little bit or just even nudge them over a little bit. So that was a big thing for me starting up. It was more, where can I place these sounds so that they sound good and not just randomly guess. Now we're going to be getting into some more advanced tricks. So before that is the foundation. That is what I really want you guys to understand and get out of this course, especially the volume. That is one that is often overlooked and it's very, very powerful. So a statement a lot of new producers will say is they can't get that fullness in their sound. And how you can achieve that is through layering. So every single sound has different characteristics. Sometimes just layering your hits, even if that be like a kick drum or a hi-hat or a percussion hit, that just creates fullness in your tracks. And then to take the layering even further, what you can do is, so for example, let's say you have one snare hit. Then you take another snare hit, you pan it far left, you take another snare hit, you pan it far right. Now that snare hit is hitting hard in the middle, but it's also very wide sounding. So that's helping you to create that fullness in your hit. And also because sounds all sound different, all their different sound kind of molds together. If you've tried it before, it's nothing amazing, but it is an advanced trick which, can easily be overlooked. Another thing you can do to make your drum loops more interesting is using more than one drum sample. Now you can use it for layering. So for example, you have two drum hits that hit at the same point. I do this often, but something you do have to be careful there is because it's low frequency. If the bass is clashing, you can really, really notice it in the low end. You're gonna get a horrible wobble sound, and that's not what you want. In your bass, you want nice, tight, clean bass, so it's hitting hard, it's not fighting with anything. But this point about using more than one drum sample, I'm not really focusing on layering your drum sample because that was in the layering sounds point above. I'm using this more in a sense of use this other kick drum as a filler. So for example, like where like your main kick drum isn't hitting, you can use a secondary kick kind of in the background to fill in the drum loop, just so people aren't listening to those same sounds over and over. It just really makes a nice drum loop in the end. Okay, so our next one is the cut itself feature. So I actually have a YouTube tutorial. It's free. You guys can just type like cut itself beat struggles or something like that. Why you'll want to do this is, as I mentioned earlier about your kick drum, and you get like that wobble sound. You can use this cut itself feature to remove that wobble sound, because when a sound plays, it can immediately cut off and then start again. If you play your sample and then you play your sample again, it's now overlapping. For us as humans, when we listen to that, right away we hear like, whoa, something's wrong. I'm hearing the original note with the new note and it's overlapping in a really bad way. And how you fix this is with cut itself. So what it does is when you play that first note, it'd be playing, and as soon as you play the second note, that first note immediately cuts off. It stops playing and the second note now starts, and it creates a very clean and precise sound. All right, and then so after all those kind of tricks and stuff like that, there's a bunch of kind of odds and ends that I'd want to show you here. So we got tempo tricks. Your tempo affects like your mood and stuff like that. Your sound placement is what defines if you're going to create a dance track, a hip hop track, R&B, etc., etc. But if you then adjust your tempo, it kind of alters that feel a little bit. For me personally, as a producer, I kind of work what I feel that I want to work at. So for example, like if I'm going to go adjust the tempo, when you open up FL Studio, I think it starts at like 140 beats per minute. So I'll look at it and be like, oh, well, I don't want to create a dance track. I want to create more like a beat, something I can rap to, more of a urban hip hop kind of style. So I'll just adjust it down and I'll be like, oh, well, you know what? I haven't made a beat in the 70s in a while. So I'll put it like, let's say like 74. And then, next time I go to make a beat, I'm like, oh, well, I haven't made a beat in like the 90s in a while. So I'll put it to 90. I'll start making my drum loop. And if I feel that my kick and my snare are a little too quick of what I'm going for, or even too slow, that's where I will adjust it to where I think it suits what I'm going for. Okay, and our next one is swing. Okay, so what swing does is it moves around some notes to get away from the step sequencer sound, okay? And when I say step sequencer sound, what I mean is like perfectness. Since a step sequencer is like, a computer, things are rigid. So in other words, they're very strict. It's just gonna consistently play on perfect timing, which is why a lot of people will always say about computer music sounding, it's not human-like. But you can create human-like feel out of computer music. It's just, using things such as like swing or volume and moving around notes a little bit so they aren't perfectly on time. This is to do with like quantization and stuff like that too. So like when it automatically adjusts your notes so that it is hitting on proper time. I use quantization all the time, but on certain notes, I will just kind of sometimes nudge over a little bit because that gets my beats away from that robotic step sequencer perfectness kind of feel. Later on, I'm going to show you how to nudge your notes manually, which is how I really like to do it. But sometimes using swing is very powerful just to kind of do it for you automatically. I usually just do a little bit, but if I'm going for like a real kind of hip hop loose kind of feel, sometimes I'll do quite a high percentage of swing. It all depends on like the type of beat you're trying to create and stuff like that. So just to read the point quickly, so swing, it nudges certain notes to get away from the robotic feel. Our next one is the workflow when building loops. It's kind of hard to explain. I will show you my workflow on that, just because sometimes when you're making a beat and the beat is starting to become catchy, you kind of get away from workflow. I will show you that visually in the course just so that you guys can understand what I'm saying there. Now again, to do a sound placement like I was saying before, I want to go over where safe spots are. So learn where hits sound good every time, then tweak from what you know to be original. So like I was saying with the safe spots, I know sounds are always going to sound good in certain spots. I can then, maybe remove a sound or just move the sound over a little bit. This, like I was saying before, was my hardest part of producing, and it still is, because that is what creates, a beautiful composition. That's what makes one producer better than another, is because of where they place their sounds and how they place it. That's all to do with music. Sometimes you can't even teach that stuff. It's more just kind of, that's just what I came up with, that's my beat. So to continue on with some more odds and ends, this is to do with extending the beats inside your pattern. So in FL Studio, when you first open it up, the step sequencer is only at 4 beats. So that's 1 bar, okay? So in 1 bar, there's 4 beats. So for example, if you had 2 bars, that would be 8 beats. If you're only making 4 beat loops or 1 bar loops, this can be amazingly annoying if that loop is not catchy. So this isn't to say that I do not make 1 bar loops or, the 4 beat loops, same thing. But what I recommend is make your loops like a minimum of 8 beats and then change up a note here or there on the last 4 beats of that loop. Because if the loop keeps repeating and repeating and repeating, so if it isn't catchy, that is annoying. So if you have a loop and it's playing, so on the first 4 beats, it can play. And then on the last 4 beats, let it keep playing. And then just like 1 note, just change it. Change where it hits. By doing that, that's how you kind of create variety and change up in your track. So it's not just repetitive. Because if you think about it, every single loop is repeating. Right? Like that's music. Like all it's doing is it just keeps repeating. But the difference is it catchy? That is the idea behind this point, is try to avoid the 4 beat loops. There are times where I will make a quick 4 beat loop. But you just have to keep in the back of your mind, is this going to be annoying? Is it playing always in my track? Is it only playing at the chorus? That kind of mindset, okay? Otherwise it can get very, very annoying. Okay, so then I'm going to show you how to manually nudge your notes. So before I mentioned swing kind of does this automatically. Manually nudging your notes gives you more flexibility and creativeness and control over nudging of notes. And again, what it does is, like I have here, it adds humanness. It gets away from that robotic feel, that step sequencer perfect kind of sound. Okay, so now end loop bring-ins. So bring the loop back in by spicing up the end of the loop. So this is to do kind of with the extend pattern beats. Like I was saying, if that loop just keeps playing and it's not catchy, it's gonna get annoying, and it's gonna get annoying fast. So what you can do is you can add notes in near the end of your loop to kind of bring the loop back in. So it kind of lets the listener know that the loop is at the end of it, and then it brings it back in. Some examples, what you could do here is you could just kind of put like a cymbal hit or like a reverse cymbal hit, or some bongos, or like a tom, or even just like a sound effect. You put a sound effect at the end of the loop, and what it's doing is it's bringing back the loop, so that you can kind of keep playing without it sounding boring. This is usually better if you have like 4-bar loop, so like 16 beats, and then like on like the end of like those 16 beats, you would then put like a sound effect or something like that. And that is pretty much the basics of what we are going to be covering. Now I'm just gonna go over the tutorial process, okay? So first of all, I've made a loop. We're gonna go over that. I'm gonna show you, just all the points that we've gone over here in the slides, just so you guys can see it, hear it, and kind of see what we're getting into. And then we are gonna build 2 drum loops, okay? One's gonna be kind of urban hip hop-ish, so just kind of like my beats in general, and then one's gonna be dancey, just so you guys can kind of see by the sound placement how you can really, kind of create different drum loops. Next, we're gonna go over all like those foundational basics, like your volume, your sound selection, your panning, and your sound placement. So this is my approach. By no means is this like an industry standard. When I create my beats, this is my mindset. This is what goes into it. And if you've checked out my beats, if you like my drum loops, if you like my beats, this is my approach. This is what I do, okay? We're gonna dive deeper into those advanced tricks. So again, stuff like layering, using more than one drum sample, and like the cut itself feature, stuff like that. Layering really does make the difference. It really creates a fuller sound. And then I'm going to explain the workflow process on building drum loops. Now, talk odds and ends, so such as like topics like tempo. So did you know that 140 beats per minute can be 70 beats per minute too? This just all depends on where you put your snare or your clap. And then finally, I'm gonna sign off, say my goodbyes and promotions. The sounds I'll be using in this video are from Soundpack Flyer. So we are going to now get into the pre-made drum loop, just to kind of go over these points. After the pre-made drum loop, we are gonna actually get into making our own drum loops, all right? So let's head into it.